July 13, 1977. Just after 9:30 in the evening, New York City was blazing under a heat wave when, in an instant, every borough was swallowed by darkness. What most thought was a simple blackout quickly turned into a night of confusion, fear, and chaos for over 8 million people. Was this just a technical glitch, or the tipping point for a city on the verge of collapse? The story behind the night New York went dark is not what you remember. Its true cause changes everything that follows. July 13, 1977. The air in Manhattan pressed heavy against the glass, thick with heat, and the low hum of a city refusing to slow down. Apartment windows stood open to catch any hint of a breeze, while the skyline glowed with neon and office lights that never seemed to blink off. Then, without warning, the world snapped to black. Radios cut out mid-song. Air conditioners sputtered and died, leaving rooms suddenly silent and stifling. For a moment, it felt as if time itself had stopped. People stepped into hallways, their footsteps echoing in the dark. Flashlights and cigarette lighters flickering along stairwells that had never seemed so endless. Out on the street, headlights became the only source of order, slicing through intersections where traffic lights had gone dead. On the upper floors, families pressed against windows, searching for the familiar glow of Times Square or the Empire State Building, only to find nothing but darkness stretching in every direction. Some called out to neighbors, voices carrying farther than they ever had before. Others waited, breath held, for the city's pulse to return. But as the minutes dragged on, it became clear. This was not a brief outage. In a city built on the promise that the lights would always stay on, the blackout felt less like an inconvenience and more like a question hanging in the hot, still air. What happens when the thing that holds everything together simply disappears? Lightning struck high-voltage transmission lines north of New York City just after 8:30 p.m., sending a surge down the wires toward the city's main substations. In the Con Edison control room, alarms began to sound as protective relays tripped and breakers opened to shield equipment from damage. Each line that went offline pushed more load onto the remaining connections, straining them closer to their limits. Operators attempted to reclose circuits and redistribute power, but the system was already running near capacity from the heat wave's relentless demand for air conditioning. At 8:37 p.m., the Indian Point 3 nuclear plant, a major source of electricity, separated from the grid after detecting unstable conditions. With that generator gone, the city became even more dependent on a shrinking number of supply lines. Over the next hour, the situation deteriorated. Manual attempts to shed load and reduce voltage barely made a dent. A critical miscommunication at 9:14 p.m. led to a slow, partial response when the system needed an immediate, massive drop in demand. As more lines tripped, the grid's frequency and voltage slipped out of control. By 9:36 p.m., the last big generator shut down, and the city's entire electrical network collapsed. In the control room, the panels that once glowed with the pulse of the city went dark, leaving only the echo of alarms and the knowledge that New York had gone silent. In some parts of Manhattan, the blackout took on a strange, almost festive air. With refrigerators warming and nothing left to do indoors, people climbed onto rooftops and gathered on stoops, sharing drinks and stories under a sky suddenly full of stars. Bars handed out warm beer, restaurants cooked off food before it spoiled, and neighbors, many meeting for the first time, lingered together in the thick summer night. For a few hours, the city's constant buzz was replaced by laughter, candlelight, and the feeling of a block party that stretched for miles. But across the river and uptown, the mood was heavier. In neighborhoods where the city's promises had already worn thin, the darkness felt like something else entirely. Years of layoffs, shrinking city budgets, and red lines drawn on maps had left entire blocks in Brooklyn, the Bronx, and Harlem with broken streetlights and abandoned buildings even before the power went out. For families living paycheck to paycheck, The blackout was not a novelty. It was a reminder of how quickly the thin thread of order could snap. In these places, the night's silence pressed in with a different weight, and the question was not just when the lights would come back, but what might happen before they did. On commercial strips in Brooklyn and the Bronx, the blackout's silence shattered under the sound of broken glass. Appliance stores and electronics shops, places where televisions and radios had always seemed just out of reach, became the first targets. Crowds surged along Flatbush Avenue and up Broadway in Bushwick, forcing open security gates and hauling out boxes of stereos, refrigerators, and color televisions. Storefronts that had survived a decade of economic decline were emptied in minutes. In Crown Heights, a 5-block stretch lost nearly every business to looting or fire. Flames rose from warehouses and furniture stores, lighting up the night where streetlights had failed. One small business owner, who had spent years rebuilding after the city's fiscal crisis, watched helplessly as his shop was gutted and set ablaze. For many merchants, insurance was a distant promise, if it existed at all. By dawn, entire corridors looked like bombed-out ruins, rows of gutted storefronts, blackened brick, and the twisted remains of metal gates. For some, that night meant the end of a business, a livelihood, and a future in the neighborhood. Patrol cars crawled through darkened streets, their radios crackling with calls that came faster than anyone could answer. Years of layoffs had left the New York Police Department stretched thin, whole precincts running with half the staff they had a decade earlier. Officers found themselves waving flashlights at intersections where traffic lights had gone dead, trying to keep the flow moving while horns blared in every direction. In some neighborhoods, a single squad car was expected to cover dozens of blocks, forced to choose between a reported fire and a break-in just a few streets away. Retired officers later described that night as triage. You went where the crowd was thickest, hoping your presence alone would calm things down. Meanwhile, firefighters raced from blaze to blaze with fewer trucks than the city needed, sometimes arriving at burning buildings only to find hydrants blocked by abandoned cars or crowds. One former firefighter remembered improvising with garden hoses when the real equipment ran out. The city's emergency systems, already battered by budget cuts, were now pushed to the edge. Each crew was forced to invent new rules in the dark, knowing help might not come if they called for backup. In the sudden dark, the city's routines collapsed. Subway trains froze between stations, leaving thousands of riders stranded in tunnels that grew hotter by the minute. Some waited for hours as transit workers and police walked car to car, guiding people out along the tracks by flashlight, each step echoing in the damp, airless black. In high-rise buildings, elevator bells rang out and then went silent, trapping residents between floors. Neighbors formed rescue teams, prying open doors and helping elderly tenants climb narrow stairwells by candlelight or the weak glow of a flashlight. In apartments, families gathered around battery radios, piecing together rumors and news, trying to comfort children who were too young to remember the last blackout. Teenagers slipped out into the streets, drawn by the freedom of a city without rules, some swept up in the night's chaos, others just wandering farther from home than ever before. For every story of fear or anger, there was another of strangers knocking on doors, sharing water, or standing guard in darkened lobbies, and ordinary people finding ways to keep each other safe until morning. By the time power flickered back across the city, the official tally had reached nearly 3,700 arrests, one of the largest mass detentions in New York's history. Courtrooms overflowed with cases, most tied to looting and property crimes in the hardest-hit neighborhoods. Headlines the next morning stamped an image that would linger for decades, the phrase, "lawless New York." For city leaders, the blackout became both a crisis and an opportunity. Mayor Abe Beame stood before cameras, pointing blame at Con Edison and demanding answers for what he called a night of terror. Investigations followed, finding fault not just in the utilities' response, but in years of neglected upgrades and training. Con Edison, under pressure from regulators and the public, poured resources into grid reforms, installing new protective equipment, rewriting emergency procedures, and retraining operators to prevent another cascading collapse. The company moved quickly to show change, but technical fixes could not erase the night itself. The scars left behind were not just technical. For many small business owners, especially in Brooklyn and the Bronx, the blackout was the final blow. Insurance claims dragged on or were denied outright, and thousands of storefronts never reopened. Historians looking back see the blackout as a mirror. Some remember a city on the brink. Others recall moments of solidarity. The divide in memory echoes the divide in recovery, leaving a legacy that still shapes how New York tells the story of that night. New York's grid is stronger now, but the lines dividing its neighborhoods often remain. When the lights go out, what is exposed is not just infrastructure, it is inequality. The next crisis may look different, but its fault lines still run through the same streets. What would surface in your city?